Hi everyone, happy Thursday. Nice to see you.
Hello, hello.
I'm Lee Perry and this is Commissioner Wilson's virtual office hours.
Welcome.
Before we introduce our special guest,
So
pretend
excited.
he's not here,
Very excited.
I'll stare off.
we just wanted to say we had a huge bump up of followers this past week.
Thank you and
thank
welcome.
you so much.
Yeah. Thank you and welcome. I need you. So thank you for being here. If you share it and talk about it, and if you agree, let us know. If you disagree, let us know. We were just saying before this started that the idea really is just opening the dialogue, pulling back the veil, making sure that we're being as transparent as we can be, and that we're getting into your world wherever it is convenient for you. And then if you can, return us the favor by making sure that you let us know how things are going out there.
Yeah, and so as we're talking every week, we encourage you to add your questions in the comment box or email district1@ocfl.net if you have any questions that you want to, send over to me, and I'll answer them right away. So really quick, before we introduce our guest, let's just say a quick COVID update. There's going to be a press conference.
There's actually, I think, one going on even that's overlapping with this, and we apologize for that. Sometimes those are based on Dr. Ralpino's schedule. He is a very busy man. So that's our health department here. We rely on them for a lot of the information we get. And so coordinating those things doesn't always line up perfectly. Just know this can always be watched later. And in all the information that's released in the COVID press conference, we're going to update on our website.
Yes, we had a kind of hectic week, but there was a particular event that stood out this week more than ever before. So,
and I want to thank the kind and compassionate citizens that came out on Tuesday evening to the Ocoee City Commission. I know it was a difficult evening. It's a much smaller meeting room, and there was an issue of great importance to many people that I know, and great importance to the people of Orange County, which is our animal welfare, and taking care of our animals and pets has always been a priority for people in this area. So Orange County passed an ordinance that would prevent retail pet sales. And if this is all new subject for you, just to let you know, there was a full year from the time that went into effect for those businesses to transition to what we called a humane retail model, which means pet products, pet food, training, the multitude of services that are out there that are very profitable in that market. The city of Ocoee opted out, or is deciding to opt out of the retail pet ban that Orange County put into place for the benefit of one particular pet store. And the bigger issue really isn't that they have concerns with Orange County's ordinance, or that they have concerns with the retail pet ban in general. It's that this particular pet store actually has some pretty hefty data in the reports at our very own animal services that they import from some of the worst puppy mills in the country. And we have that data, we have those facts. We have an animal services department, and we have a health services department, and we took all of that information over a period of months and months and months. And actually, this has been ongoing for several years, as far as looking at ways to prevent the resale of these puppies that have been treated so poorly and are oftentimes carrying really bad diseases, and they share those diseases sometimes within their houses to both the other pets or the people. And oftentimes they end up back with the county at the animal shelter, because there is no shelter in Ocoee. There's no animal services in Ocoee. So that is Orange County's realm. So really the issue on the table was whether or not they were going to provide an exemption for this one pet store. And they are going that way. They appear to be retooling the language of the ordinance. I really just wanted them to look at the data and look at the facts, and talk to the people that work in animal services and take in our sick pets every day. Orange County Animal Services doesn't turn away any animals. They don't turn away any animals, no matter how sick, no matter what their behavioral issues are. And right now they're they're so crammed in that they're comfortably one or two per stall, and they're now 3 to a stall. And we recently, tragically, there was a fire at the Orlando Pet Alliance, which they lease part of Orange County Animal Services property. And so there's even more care to be had, and there's more animals to be taken care of. the pet store that's in question has imported over 3,000 puppies in the last couple of years. And, you know, there's some dispute as to whether or not those puppies, when they get sick, if they end up at our shelter, because unfortunately when they come in, we can't ask them where they were born. And they can't look at us and say, I was born in a horrible place in Missouri, and then I got in a truck, and then this family couldn't keep me because I was really sick and they dropped me off here. But what we do know is there are many, many purebred dogs that come in with really bad genetic and infectious diseases. And so, you know, being able to put those two things together and seeing other municipalities and other counties that have been able to stem the tide of puppy mill puppies coming in their community, we took that action as a county. So there was no intent to try to supersede what Ocoee or any other municipality wants to do in their government. It was really to protect the health, safety, and welfare of residents and animals. So, you know, I just wanted to put that out there. We will be in touch as I guess they're going to revisit the language. I don't know what's going to happen next, but I will, the second that I have information, I will share it with you all. You know how I feel about this. It is something that, you know, really hits home with so many people. So I appreciate you all for staying plugged in and for everyone that came out that night.
Yes, and just really quick, we also had a Big Sand Lake community meeting, which I just uploaded the video on YouTube, so you can check it out, and I will also be posting about it if anybody missed that. Pet Alliance is still accepting donations, and we're in conversation about doing some volunteering. They really need adopters and fosters.
Fosters and adopters. Right now, they are displaced, and they've done a great job of. And by the way, while we're here and we're saying it, I want to thank the first responders, the sheriff's department, the fire department, who came that night and they rescued over 30 dogs. And I mean, unbelievable efforts, because it was a fully engulfed building. So the Pet Alliance of Greater Orlando is now really trying to make sure that they can seamlessly take care of those animals. And so anything that you can do to help. They are also partners with many, many rescues in the area. And what I loved watching during this horrible time was that networking that happens between all these compassionate groups and all these rescues that realize, if I take a little bit, then we can solve this. And if I take a little bit, we can solve this. And so, you know, if you are somebody who's involved in one of the smaller rescues, you know, stay plugged in. They're probably dealing with more now because of it also.
And the last thing I'll remind everybody about before we introduce our special guest is the Selnick rezoning community meeting that's going to be taking place on September 29th in person. So we will be posting about that.
And this is the piece of property across the street from Windermere High School. I know it's been a great interest to the public. We are going to make sure to do several reminders. This is the meeting where the developer comes, gives their application, goes through it with the public. The public gets to engage, ask questions, and state their concerns. I've been really clear about my concerns about the traffic, about the school overcrowding, and about the designation across the street of rural enclave or rural community, and what that means to be engaging with the community across the street that they wanted to put an apartment complex that looks like it's going to be townhomes. But it's an opportunity for you to participate in that. And that's, you know, really going to be something that that we'll need for you to come out for. If you can email them ahead of time or email me ahead of time, we'll make sure to also supply any of those comments.
Alrighty. So, look who's here. Wow.
Teleported in.
We have a special guest today named
I'm so
Mr.
grateful.
Eric Kidwell. Nice to meet you.
Eric Kidwell is a friend, I call colleague, because we could sit here and talk policy and issues all day, even though we come from very different professional worlds. But somebody who I, as a friend and neighbor in District 1, have always relied on for his wisdom and his thoughtfulness about, you know, issues. And even though he has no background in law enforcement that I know of.
No, none.
He stepped up and volunteered for a very important appointment within District 1 with the sheriff's, I'm going to mess up this, Citizens
I mess it up still all the
Advisory
time.
Committee.
Citizens Advisory Committee.
Yes.
Through the sheriff's office. And we really wanted to invite Eric here today, not just to introduce himself and become like maybe a regular, but also to explain basically what that means. I think I've brought up before, we have so many positions in advisory committees. This one is very distinct and unique that that it's with a different constitutional officer. So he's literally giving and participating with a different elected, even though as an elected, he was an appointee. So it's a very unusual and unique opportunity for citizens to plug in. So I'm extraordinarily grateful for his work there. And I'm going to actually hand over the mic here, if you will, so that we can dig in a little bit and get some of his feedback. But I want to let you know that if you're out there in the world and you're like, well, the sheriff's, that's not where I'd want to be, but there is something, and there's something that's of interest to you. We have 40 or more advisory boards, and some of those aren't appointments from me. Some of them come through our membership and mission review board, but they're still open applications. And this is a participation sport. Democracy requires you. And if you are curious about it, interested, want to participate, you don't need to be an expert. And I want to just encourage that. And
Yeah, so who are you?
Who am I? That's philosophically, historically.
Yeah.
So I'm a citizen of District 1, who met our commissioner on the sidelines of soccer fields.
True
Our
story.
sons are the same age, good buddies.
we ended up yelling at, no, we don't yell at
I yell. No, actually, I'm committed this year to not yelling, which is good. I
He's
actually
also a rep. So
I refereed high school soccer and club soccer and those kind of things too. So that's actually where my yelling came from, was because it frustrated me to see things that weren't going the right way as they were supposed to go. And to tie that into what I do now, in this regard, is I'm not an expert in law enforcement, and I think that helps, because I approach what we do on the committee from that perspective of a citizen, which is candidly what the sheriff wants.
that's right.
So just the background of the committee is, now I don't actually know the full history of the committee. Having just joined in February, I think was my first meeting. Had to go through a lot of process to
Be
get cleared, vetted.
Yeah,
I had
and
to
it
apply, background
is-
check, whole
yeah.
thing. And so my first meeting was in February, and I really went to the first meeting going, what is this thing? And I left, and I called my wife, and I said, uh-oh, this is a big deal.
It is a big deal.
It is a big deal. And because, candidly, in many municipalities across the country, I've lived other places and things, sometimes these things are ceremonial.
That's right.
And I actually said to our commissioner before we started, I said I went in trying to figure out, my first question was, is the sheriff trying to appear transparent, or does he want to be transparent? And I'm happy to report to my fellow citizens, the sheriff wants to be transparent.
Which, and if you think about the utility of having an advisory board, even being able to communicate that back
Yep.
to your neighbors, to your friends, to your community.
Yes, I have come away extraordinarily impressed from top to bottom with that entire organization. And so I guess one of the things that we in our community and just in our country in general is we're searching for good faith.
Yeah.
We're hoping for good faith. We're hoping that our public servants are operating in good faith. We can disagree about many things.
Right.
People can make many mistakes, but if they're operating in good faith,
Then it's
then they are. And I'm pleased to report to you, from my perspective, they are operating in good faith, and that has been such a welcome thing for me. And I didn't have an expectation one way or the other.
right, because you are a citizen.
right, yeah.
As a non-professional law enforcement officer, as somebody who didn't come in with an experience or
Right.
even really.
So and really, so my perspective came in. So the big thing, the first thing that, and it's a thing that it's still referenced continually on this committee, is last summer.
Yeah.
So the biggest charge that the Citizens Advisory Committee has had so far was in response to the George Floyd murder and the social justice movement that sort of.
The awakening that
Yeah.
we've had as a community.
And so the sheriff asked the committee for to review some of the policies around release of information, whether it be use of force or any situation like that happened. And they recommended some changes, and those changes were accepted and adapted. So citizens said, hey, maybe we could do this a little bit better. And the sheriff said, yeah, you're right, we can. So so my first thing was, I was like, that's really cool.
Yeah.
Something, So now so since I have been on the committee, our our charges have not been that charged.
But some very
But
important,
they've been interesting. So the two charges we've had so far are the social media policy,
which is really, really important.
which came out of some TikTok and Facebook and Instagram things, deputies in uniform doing ththings that the sheriff's department thought, okay, this is not a good representation.
This isn't
of us.
reflective of the
Right.
of the organization of the police, the force, and
Yeah.
so they have.
And so they said, so look at our policy and see what you think. What should we do? And it's actually really difficult.
Yeah.
Because
I mean, look, right now, what
Yeah.
are we doing? We're talking to people on social media.
Yeah.
It can be a source for social connection. It can be a source for information, unfortunately, sometimes.
Yep.
It can be a source, and it can really tarnish a reputation in a way that doesn't ever come back because it's out there forever.
Right. And a lot of what I thought with that policy that was something we should address was actually from the staff and deputy perspective, what is okay and what is not, and giving them, I used the word clarity in the meeting. It was my first big contribution to the committee. I said, what we think we need is better clarity. This is unclear. And so that sort of became everything I shared was about, is this clear? If I am a 21-year-old deputy in the field,
Right.
and I am out, the iconic thing that always comes up is the shooting basketball with kids in the street and making community connection, which is fantastic.
Yeah.
Is that okay to do? What if the kid is playing some music in the background that has foul language in it? Should I share that? Maybe I should, maybe I shouldn't. And so ultimately we made two recommendations, and we actually made the first recommendation that the sheriff has ever not accepted, which was okay. I understand why.
It's the process.
We changed the policy. We basically just took a subordinate paragraph, out and made it its own paragraph.
Okay.
Which just strengthened the language to say this is really important. Is essentially what that was.
Because it was tucked in under something else.
It was tucked in under something else. So
being able to emphasize it, because it is
Yeah.
one of those things that social media, where we are right now and where we were 3 years ago, 4 years ago, 5 years ago, 6, 8 years ago, I mean, it's changed so fast.
right.
And I think it's going to continue to.
Oh yeah.
So it's,
Well, interestingly, one of the policies in the code of conduct I think still reads, social media. I have to be wrong, and maybe it was in the presentation, but there was something that referenced MySpace.
yeah,
And I went,
case in point, right?
So
There's
those
just,
of you watching, MySpace is a former social.
there may be many people watching this that
My
were born.
MySpace is still really active.
Is it?
and- No.
You can tell we are peers.
Yeah, we're a little.
There may be a little bit of a generational
Could
thing.
be.
But that's
But in any case, so the policy has to address the social network that may come out
Right.
next year. So the policy that was not adapted or adopted was the committee recommended essentially that they get approval for every post. And I actually thought that was kind of a mistake. We weren't really recommending that, but that's the way the language came out.
Yeah.
I don't know if you know this, but
I-
sometimes the language is different than what you intended,
Right.
and it has different consequences.
this exactly.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
but in any case, that's the way it read, and so the sheriff looked at that and said, first of all, we can't. I don't have the manpower to be reviewing every social media post.
Yeah.
I think our intention was, as a committee, to say, let's give them an outlet to say, is this okay?
Yeah.
And if it gets
Guideline.
cleared, then there's no consequence if something goes sideways.
That's right. So that they're
But that's not really how the language came out. The language came out, you have to get everything approved or just don't post it.
no.
Yeah.
And I think I agree with the sheriff's decision to not.
it's draconian.
that,
Like it
yeah.
feels at that point, and I think there's that slippery slope of chilling what could be a great opportunity to connect with
Yep.
the community and having those moments that are captured. My friend Chris Tatum, who's in the sheriff's department, there was a moment captured of him coming out of a sandwich shop, and somebody else caught the moment of him giving a sandwich to somebody that was a
Oh,
homeless
nice.
person right there, and it happened to be one of these really wonderful moments that was not planned or plotted, and then it got
Yeah.
shared, and I thought, well, you can't, that is a very difficult thing if
Yeah.
you're told that you can't have anything on social media,
Right.
and then you found out that this was put out there and you're in it, and
Yeah.
I didn't get it approved, and I could see how there would be.
Yeah.
And it's such a core thing of being a human being in 2021. We kind of are our social media, which is actually the point of the other part of the policy that was adapted and adopted, because deputies and staff need to understand that. You are what you put out, and it's a reflection on the
That
department and on the
reputational
county.
link.
Well, it's not, sorry to interrupt you. It's just, it's not really fair sometimes, because they're also fighting something that's much greater in terms of how the media portrays
Yes.
police officers and sheriffs
True.
in uniform. You know, like that was something that one of the sheriffs that presented
Yeah.
in the Williamsburg community meeting brought up, that there are shows that portray street racing and police and you know, things like that in a certain way that
on a
they
closed
have to,
course.
yeah,
So it looks on the TV show like they're
they're
Right.
like cool and drag racing,
And-
and then
and
the
it-
cops are coming after
and then
them.
nobody minds all this risk. Well, it's a closed course on the TV show.
Yeah,
Right.
like Cops is one of the longest running shows, but it's done a lot of harm in the portrayal of how different, you know, officers. Now there are systemic issues that, you know, definitely seep past, you know, the point where we need to have a conversation. But I just think that it's like you need to have a really good way to get ahead of that bad PR that's happening without you even commenting,
Right.
because the media has taken control
Yeah.
of what a police officer in your community is, you know. And so there's an inherent fear from that portrayal that
Totally.
local offices don't have the control over too.
Right. And you know, so much of the discussion when people come give presentations to us, so much of the underlying discussion is, please realize this is hard. What we do is hard.
Yeah.
Like please understand that. And we'll probably talk in a minute about, we both had the chance to go through the simulator, the use of force simulator. Life changing, right?
Life-changing.
In terms of how your perspective on those things.
I wish everybody could go through that.
Yeah.
And so much of what they're saying to us all the time is, do you see how hard that was? And this snippet would be taken out of context, and then you'd be used to portray not only that individual, that public servant, but also the department as a whole,
Right.
and our profession as a whole. Now,
I know that I'm not alone, that I don't want to pick out a lawyer to represent one lawyer
Right.
to represent all lawyers
Yes.
in their conduct and their character.
Right.
So that's the same in all professions.
Yes, and that's not to say that there's never been a thing where they're saying, look, everything is perfect. It's been the opposite.
Right.
They said, no, we have a lot of things to correct.
Right.
But the social media, back to the social media policy, and we've talked about this before we started too. We have a default outrage setting
Yes.
in our country today, where
It's a great way to put that.
we're also looking for a reason to flip the switch.
Yes.
And it's very easy to say, this thing happened, and without any other information, flip the switch and say, therefore this is bad.
Yes.
And sometimes people in our service have made terrible mistakes in good faith. And that's where I kind of come back to is, but we flip that switch on and it's all over.
And you can't
And there are situations where people have made mistakes in bad faith, and that's the stuff we have to correct.
Right.
But we do need to offer some grace to the people that work with us and for us in our service.
Absolutely.
To say, could we maybe flip the switch later once we get the information? And that's really been a lot of what of the work on the committee has been, is just the transparency of explaining, this is how things work. It's not perfect, but we're working to perfect it. And we have some really good people that are trying to do this, and we'd like the citizens to help. And it's been really refreshing.
And just the idea, I had said this before we went on, but the idea of having that citizen input, what I call the peek behind the veil, the understanding of all those mechanisms is such an asset to our community.
Yep.
And having those extra voices at this level and this level. And I think, to the point that you were making about the people making mistakes, but if they're not in good faith. And what do you think when we look at those mistakes and the mistakes that can be so consequential in that field in particular? What are you seeing as far as what angles or policy?
Well, so back to the original charge with the George Floyd entire thing that happened, that policy was more about transparency. So what's happening is actually that the sheriff's department is asking us to trust them more, but giving us more information with that trust. As a citizen and as someone who's paid attention, I'm not quite sure we're worthy of that trust. But they could go one way or the other. They could go, no, we're going to close.
Okay.
We're going to close up. Or they could say, we're going to open up and trust.
Okay.
And they've chosen, let's open. So it's one of those things where there is a mistake on the horizon that will be tested by this.
Right.
And we'll see how we do.
And
And I'm an optimistic person. So but hopefully then there will be voices that say, let's stop for a minute and say, hey, in good faith, was this a mistake? In good faith, bad faith, was it a mistake? And then deal with the consequences
right.
going forward.
Because if you don't, then that's part of the system,
Yeah.
right? And we talk about, people love the word systemic, systemic issues, systemic racism, systemic. What does that mean, right?
Yep.
If you break it down, systems, they're policies, they come down to paragraphs, they come down to decisions that are made big and small
Yep.
every day,
Yep.
and how ensconced they become, and how willing an organization is to unravel.
Yep, absolutely. So it's been good. Now the next thing we're on to is we had a citizen write in and say that her son had been pulled over, and that she had done some research that's to say, well, this particular deputy had a history of racial bias, et cetera, et cetera. Now, the easy thing to do would have been for the sheriff to say, well, actually, there's no way she has that data on that individual officer because that's not available, right? So, and that would have been right.
Because there just isn't
Because there isn't
kind
that
of
data.
to come in.
So I'm certain that this citizen thought that they believed that absolutely, and they could have been correct.
right.
Could have been.
Right, and they had experienced
Right.
something that made them feel like this was worthy of exploration, regardless.
Yeah.
So,
But the sheriff, again, instead of just saying, well, that data is that actually is not available, he said, no, I'm going to give you a charge to
Okay.
the committee to look at our stats and see where we are.
okay,
So we're in the middle of it at the moment. So it's not, I wouldn't want to characterize it yet, except to say that the statistics are available on the website, transparency,
yeah, that's everything. And I think,
and
yeah, I mean, for my young people out there, sometimes you get opportunities to do research projects, and
Yeah.
to even have these discussions about these issues in a very different form than one of these type of grown up forums that we have. It'd be a cool one.
it would be a very cool one.
It would be a really cool one, and we could help with that. We could help get as much information as is available, and it seems like there's so much more information
right
than
there.
anybody expected.
It's part of their accreditation. They have to publish those stats. So a couple of the things that we're sort of working to is we break down things right now: white, black, Hispanic, other. So one of my colleagues on the committee said, listen, if we're, that sort of does two things. It implies that only 3 groups commit
Right.
offenses.
Right.
Or
Or that you can fit into one of those 3 groups,
Right.
right?
And
Because
then-
that's a tough
Yeah.
tough question in our day and age to
Yeah.
be.
And if you're going to have big buckets to throw a lot of people into a bucket that's
You
just
can't-
other,
Right.
so
Then it doesn't give you really a fair comparison. What
I would enjoy a world where there were no buckets, but if we have buckets, then we should have accurate buckets.
I agree with that, and especially in a community like this where we really have, we have some amazing and vibrant immigrant communities
Right.
that would fall into that other, and I don't know which ones we're talking about, right? Like,
Right.
it's, in that that could be of concern, knowing that that's not just a a statistic on a driver's license. That's
Right.
a neighborhood.
Yeah.
And that's an area, and oftentimes that's a church and a school and
Yep.
all those things. So I'm glad you're.
Well, and the other thing that came out of that is in the bucket of other is we don't know. So everything else gets put into other. And then, so one of my colleagues, the point of the sheriff's department was, well, we're required by CALEA which is the accreditation agency, we're required by them to put it in these things. And so the committee's point back to them was, but that doesn't mean we can't do better.
Right. That means
So-
that's the minimum, right?
Yeah,
Right. They're
that's what
setting
they're
your-
required to do. And
They're
they have
setting
to-
your floor. I
and
like
they
the
have to
floor
s-
ceiling.
And they have to send the data in that way.
Okay.
But there's nothing to say that we as Orange County couldn't say, well, then there's also this.
Yeah.
Because we have other, the data matters, but, okay, maybe not. There's not always, data doesn't always matter. Sometimes
Or
we track
doesn't
things
tell
that
a
don't
whole
matter.
story.
I think it does matter in this case, but it also, so if I were in that group of other,
Yeah.
I would want to know.
Yes.
And if I were in one of the groups that is tracked, I would want it
Yes.
not to be singled out. I would not want to be separated. So
I know, exactly.
Yeah.
I think you said it the best way you can, knowing that those are not,
Yeah.
they're man-constructed categories.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely.
So those are man-constructed categories in the first place, which makes it really...
Right. So if we were not in your office, if we were on the sideline, you and I would right now have a conversation about race as a social construct.
Right, and this is something that we're back to critical race theory, and what are we doing now?
Yeah.
But yeah, exactly.
But we won't get all that.
But it is something that's really an important, I think it's an important piece for a citizen review, for you all to be able to really understand
Yes.
what you're looking at and what is actually the experience of people. So, I mean,
So to give an example of that, so I again, I don't want to get super deep into numbers that we haven't like as a committee gone. But I mean, I'll share. I went and did my own spreadsheet and looked at the.
That's why it's a good appointee. Wait,
So-
let's back up for 1 second before you go there.
Okay.
What is your professional background?
Okay. So
Just so that you know that I
Way
didn't
back.
hire a ringer for this. It's not hiring. You volunteered.
Yeah. So way back, I worked in television actually. So for many years, I worked on the production side of television, and then I went to from there to healthcare of all things, but working sort of in the public relations, public information office, and then also doing some of the technical stuff. And then I actually went into service training for the healthcare organization. We had 10,000 team members. We didn't have any service training, so customer service is sort of. And then, so that's how I ended up here. That was in Virginia. A company made up of people that used to work at Disney doing customer service training. Were doing some training at our healthcare organization, and they went, "When did you work at Disney?" And I was like, "I never worked at Disney." They said, "Well, you could have fooled us, so you should come work for us." And so I did. And so we moved here, and then now, so I don't know if I think everyone's aware there's a pandemic happening, and so so I would travel over the country, doing training. So particularly in healthcare, they've been busy.
Yes.
And God bless them, by the way.
Yeah.
Side note.
Yes.
Take care of yourselves.
Yes.
So
You're vaccinated.
and yeah, but in any case, so there's not been a lot of that going on because who has time for it? First of all, and are we all going to get in a room together and do training?
Right,
So
it's different.
I do some. My colleague and I did a training for a healthcare organization in Dallas last week. I still do a little bit of that here and there, but mostly I am in real estate now because my wife, as it turns out, in your particular district, is the top realtor in your district. So I got my real estate license. I helped her.
That's fantastic.
So.
And it's one of those things too that if Amy was here, you would get why because she's not just brilliant, she's also really kind and caring.
That's
and,
her whole thing.
Yeah. So it's it makes sense to me that that people feel loyal to that.
Yeah.
And the reason why I'm making him bring up all this personal stuff, and I apologize for that,
okay.
is just because I think when you look at the conversation we're having about getting this data and hearing from citizens, you're hearing directly from law enforcement and presentations and from citizens about their concerns, that you're not, like, your scope is so different, right?
Yes. Yes.
I mean, it's such a, which is so, I think about bringing those experiences, communication and public relations and all of that, and even living in different communities.
Yeah.
You can't shake those off before you walk in somewhere
True.
else, right? So, we call it sometimes bias. We also can call it having fresh eyes or having that,
Yes.
a different view when you get a chance to look at these things.
One of the most important things, and back to your original point about that there are a lot of opportunities for citizens to serve. Fresh eyes is something that, in all my consultancy work with healthcare, one of my primary things that I do was undercover healthcare stuff. So I would go in and they'd wheel me into the hospital like a patient, or I'd walk around and see, are people picking up, I would drop trash and see, are people picking up trash? But the value of it was fresh eyes. If you did that yourself, you wouldn't know.
Right.
So we always would encourage them to bring in outside people to say, okay, let's look and see what it looks like from the outside. We do have to look from the inside as well.
But having that.
Yeah, but if you're a citizen of a place that you love living, which how could you not love living here? He says as a realtor. But there are opportunities for you, and it doesn't have to be tied to what you do. And so, quick soapbox. It's not. You shouldn't just do it if you want. It's your duty.
Yeah.
Like we live in service of one another, or we should. And so I'm very honored that, to be able to serve in this capacity. I really am. I mean, I consider it an honor every time.
I feel very
Every time
grateful.
I go. And so I hope that people will understand that there are opportunities. The size of our community is so big that you can't reach out to people individually and say, here's an opportunity for you. Would you? So you have to know that.
Right.
And so, okay.
And much to that point of me not being able to reach out to you, I don't know sometimes the things that are discussed in these boards. There would be no way for me to be able to give that input to that board, for me to gather that information. So it's really a delegation of power in a way that only somebody, a citizen of a district or a citizen of a county, would be able to do. So it's really a very important role in whatever board it is.
Absolutely. And
Oh, go ahead. No, I was just going to chime in.
do it.
Well, I know at least from last year and the conversation about, taking the budgets that are allocated to police and allocating it towards resources for the community, right? Because I know there's certain, I know the city of Orlando, for example, spends like 33% of their budget on the sheriff's, their police department, excuse me. And so people are starting to really have a conversation of like, where's money going in our community? And but yet at the city of Orlando, less than 2% of their budget is going into housing, for example. So like these conversations are happening where if people are in situations where they're in vulnerable communities, we should really try to reconstruct the funding to go into resources to help people rather than kind of policing them in those conversations. I know from my perspective, I think people definitely need to be brought into the conversation, which is why I think a citizen committee is so important. Transparency in it is important. I think social media strategy and PR is all very important. But I think at the end of the day, what you brought up, Commissioner, is reform, right? Because there's certain things that are allowed across our nation. I just wrote a couple here, those huge like piercing sound alarms that they use to control like riots and things like that. In certain states, those are not allowed, and in certain states those are regularly used, and it can actually cause a lot of physical damage on people's ears and hearing. Whether or not states regulate the usage of body cameras as a norm, chokeholds, and overall like the reporting in itself of certain abuses, whether or not that's mandatory. Like my mom and both of my brothers have been victims of some type of police brutality, and it was never reported or never checked. My mom saw a young man kind of being abused by 5 police officers. He was under the age of 17, and she was taking out her phone to record it, and another police officer came, grabbed the phone, ripped it out of her hand, stepped on it, and then took her head and banged it on the concrete. And that was never reported. So like these types of things, like the accountability needs to be there too. And I think policy needs to be a part of that.
Well, I was going to say, and just to be fair, that was in
A different state.
different state, and
Completely different state.
I was so grateful to hear that Orange counties, they all have the body
cameras,
yeah,
yeah.
which
And not all states have a
No.
citizen committee that brings in the public to have these
I know
conversations.
very
on-
few do.
Very few. And so I'm really grateful to hear that these conversations are being had. It's just, when are bills on a federal level going to get passed? That's my feelings, as a person who's seeing these things happen through generations.
Just to point out something that you used in your first sentence, you said these things are used to control riots. Here's the interesting thing that's happening in our country is that who gets to define
That's
that?
Riot,
This
yeah.
is
Almost nobody.
Yeah.
Almost nobody
Yeah.
would object to more extreme measures being used to control a riot. But nobody wants that to control a protest.
right.
Yeah.
And so who gets to define that? And right now, largely in America, it's the sheriff gets to define that.
Yep.
So that's why I feel very grateful that we have a sheriff who is at least in tune with that connection.
Yep.
That the words matter, and it doesn't mean that we're always going to get it
Definitionally,
right.
things are-
But as soon as I heard you say that, I was like, well, what's a
What's a riot? Yeah.
And we
Versus a
could talk
protest.
about that stuff forever.
Well, and
but
And I would like actually to hear your some thoughts about the update and development of the behavioral, because the other part of this is how often things that turn out so tragic were because of a mental health issue or an addiction, either latent or one that people, neighbors, friends, family knew about, called,
right,
and they go they go sideways.
So I'll start with as quick as I can a story to tell you why this behavioral resource unit is so important to me. So my mother was schizophrenic. She's since passed. She had she had schizophrenic. She had dementia. We had some times. So back in Virginia at one point she wandered off, and she was having a schizophrenic episode. It was difficult. Took her to J-Pod at the hospital where I worked actually. Was the psych section of the emergency department. And were it not for someone I went to high school, Melvin Dillard, was a tech working in the emergency room. He came to me and he said, "Eric, sit down." I said, "What's going on?" And he said, your mother, they're going to take her to Chesapeake, which from there was about an hour away drive. They said, the law is we have to handcuff her and put her in the back of a police car by herself and take her there." Okay?
For being schizophrenic.
But there were lots of reasons for that, and I wasn't mad about that.
I know.
Even
that makes my heart hurt,
right?
Because this wasn't malice.
But she was probably a danger to
herself
and others.
And that's what we have to
do. So
we don't have a better model.
I actually understood the reason for it, but Melvin in that moment was my behavioral resource unit. Okay,
right.
It's a good example of what this is. So the behavioral resource unit is social workers, fantastic people that I met a couple of them. So they go
awesome.
along with the deputy on calls that that might have a mental health issue or some sort of social issue that they can help deal with. Now, in our outrage machine, okay, in the outrage machine that is the world that we live in, people see that and they go, "Oh, well, that's the kind of thing you're talking about when you want to take money away from this and put it." No, we want to have both things.
I mean, you've got to. It's, to me, it felt like something optimistic and hopeful in trying to get to. We have to have something secure and safe, right? So if we know that there's a danger to self or others, there's likely going to be a law enforcement component to it. But if we also know that there's a mental health issue, then to me, there's got to bringing that in. Yeah,
and even so one of the examples they gave, a young lady had gone out with the deputy. First of all, never comes in until it's safe. So, sort of protected by the deputy, but then, and those situations, and my mother was the most harmless person you would meet, but she was dangerous when she was having an episode, to my safety even sometimes. So keep them safe, but then when they go in, one of the examples was a mother who was having a drug issue, but there was a child there. So normally we have to have the deputy deal with the child.
Yes, and this is why when I talk about my heart being with our first responders, our law enforcement, the idea of showing up being not just law enforcement, but also a social worker, sometimes a case manager, sometimes a, add in 3 other things, professions that we could probably put on any given call. That, the bare minimum, trying to provide some of that mental health component and some of the case management component.
Totally. And so, by the way, the sheriff funded that out of his budget before it went to the commissioners.
Right.
He funded that himself. A pilot program, and then since we've added more, yes or no?
It's budgeted. It's budgeted to go, and I think that the outcomes. Obviously, we're going to have some more information because those systems that we hate, that we are trying really hard to identify that need to be repaired, it takes a while. And so seeing some of the positive outcomes will end up being a good, if there are positive outcomes, we can see it and we've got, then we end up being able to identify more funding.
And I think that's important too. When that first came up and they came and talked to us about it, what we said as a committee to them is, come back and see us in a year, and are you tracking? Are you tracking whether the outcomes? Because that's the key to the funding. Now, I will say I may have texted my commissioner when I left that meeting and said, I don't know where this is in the funding, but it was my personal story talking through my text, which was, this seems important. It seems like
They
it
have,
should
and
be
they have
work.
since actually identified in our most recent budget update, there is a position for, and they called it case management, I believe, but it's really about getting the overall program information, data collection, patterns, all that stuff. So yeah, there's going to be.
That's good.
Yeah, I think it's a very. I am also an optimist.
Yes.
But I call myself a masochistic optimist because I look right into the most painful things, and I think this is one of those. But I know, because I know it's not enough right now. We need more. We need more of those behavioral experts. We need young people to think it's important enough to study that field. We are we're at a loss for mental health professionals across the board right now. And this is a particularly challenging career in mental health. So hopefully, this is something that the more information we get, data we get, information we can bring back to schools, bring back to our training programs about the options it can provide as a career and what it's doing, hopefully to save money on the back end in not incarcerating people that should not be incarcerated because it wasn't
right.
That's not an appropriate treatment for mental health.
Well, and there are people that are associated with a deputy's call that don't go in the stat book. Yeah. So that child, me, in my mother's case. Right. So that went down in the Newport News Police Department as a statistic. We transported a person having a mental health crisis to whatever. I'm not in there. Oh, and so that BRU it's for us. It's for the citizens to be there and help in that situation. There's some very traumatic things that happen out there that are the people that serve us are out there doing. Yes. And there's a lot of collateral trauma that happens. And I just love as a citizen that we've got someone standing there with some training in helping people work through that. I think it's the best thing. Now I only know of like 10 things we're doing. There's 1,000 things the sheriff's department's doing.
It's very busy.
I know 10 of them. Of the 10 things I know we're doing, that's the best thing.
Exactly. Well, when I went and had the opportunity to go through that simulator training and the de-escalation response, one of the things that, and it wasn't just me, it was the commissioners that were there that day, we all discussed was what about the mental health component for law enforcement and being a first responder to a traumatic scene and carrying that with you and then layering that with more traumatic scenes. And so hearing also from the department about the opportunities that they're trying to improve and roll out for mental health training and outreach for their own deputies. And that to me is another part of it, because if they're not well, no one's well. And so that, the both sides thing, right? The taking care of whoever is in our community that needs law enforcement and making sure that law enforcement officer has the help. And we as a community, I don't think we forget. I don't think we do. But one thing I've noticed that a word that comes up in those meetings a lot out of the blue, and I made a mental note to go, they're carrying this pulse. Pulse. Oh. They're carrying that every day. Oh, I cannot.
And it breaks my heart. The whole situation is horrific.
Devastating.
But for our public servants
who were here,
and we just asked them to be our representative with this horrific thing that happened, and they still carry it. And they have services to help them with that. But we should not forget as citizens that in the big moments, the people that are there for us, we owe them continued recognition that they still carry that. So thanks.
No, it's really true. We toured the medical examiner's office, which once again, Orange County, I feel like there are so many things going on. There are so many things that go into local government and to take care of our citizens. And the medical examiner's office in Orange County is really, really busy. Obviously, it's a very large, high population county. And to speak to the medical examiner that was on staff the night of Pulse, and to see somebody who deals with death every day and still read the trauma on his face, and you realize that there's nothing like that you can't compare what they went through. So gratitude almost feels like, to say I have a sense of gratitude almost feels like an insufficient way to phrase that. It really is.
It's all we got, though.
It's all we got.
That's all we got.
That's all we got. That's it.
Can I go back to one thing?
Yes, I'm sorry. I'm
no, it's
fine.
I'm having fun. The statistics on the traffic thing.
Yes.
One thing I wanted to just share about that without going into and the reason I keep saying I don't want to characterize it is because of that outrage switch. Okay?
And you only have statistics, right? You don't
Right.
have the
Yes.
some of those other
Yeah. So
pieces.
really, we can't really do much with traffic stops because there's 1,000 circumstances that go into traffic stops. Now we intuitively can think, okay, is race a factor?
Right.
I asked that question to the captain in charge of the traffic folks, and he said, I can't see your race from my radar gun. So on most of these stops, that's but again, you know what part of town you're in, you have other clues.
You wonder about
but-
other pretextual type.
But we can't say. But what I sort of focused on was warnings, because warnings, a stop has been made.
Right. So you've got two people. One was
Yeah.
stopped for going 15 miles
Yes.
per hour over
Yeah.
in this area, and is this color, and this person over here was
Yes.
stopped for 15 miles per hour
Yes.
in this area in this color.
Yes.
And what is a side by side comparison?
And it is possible to look at those numbers and spin people up into outrage. It doesn't matter what the numbers say.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter what they say. But I can tell you this about the numbers, and I'll give you some exact numbers in a second. But I want to say first what I said in the meeting, which is that outrage machine. It's too easy, and it also lets us off the hook.
Yeah.
Because as soon as we get mad, then we don't
Yeah.
have to do anything about it. Because what I did about it is I got mad.
Yeah.
So
true.
So it's an opportunity for us as citizens, as the sheriff's department, to say, okay, how can we do better? And even if we're better than anyone else, if we don't have equity, then how can we lead?
Right.
That's what we're
Right.
trying to do, is lead. So if I said to you, just write down on a piece of paper what you think the difference is between a white person, a black person, and a Hispanic person. Those are the three things we track. We'll characterize other tracks
Right.
just like white, by the way, in the numbers.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. So I don't know. Again, we don't know what that is. So,
It's weird.
but if I asked you to do that, I'll go back. If I asked you to do male, female, okay, the joke from the time I got my driver's license is, well, she can bat her eyes and get out of a ticket.
Right?
That's the joke.
Right.
And it's a joke because it rings true to us, because we think, without looking at numbers, we think women get more warnings than men.
Right,
We don't
so
know
there's
if
this
that's true, but we think that.
Preconceived
okay?
notion that this
Right.
is how.
So just start with that. If you just start with gender, yes, women in Orange County over the years have gotten more warnings. Okay. So now,
Bat your eyelash.
right. Well, but that's just it. But we think it's a small difference, right? And by the way, it is a small difference.
Okay.
It is a small difference, and we think, okay, well, maybe that's not a big deal. And it also, because we know it exists, we think we don't have an opportunity to improve, right?
Yeah.
Now, if I told you to write down, what do you think the difference is between a white woman, a black woman, and a Hispanic woman? I'll bet you most people that are watching this could write it down and get pretty close, because what you think is probably true, okay, is probably true. And I'll give you a rough characterization in a minute, but think about it first.
Okay.
Think about it and say, what do I think it would be, right? Now, what you shouldn't do, I hope, and the problem with the outrage machine is then to take that and say, then it must be
Right, to overlay.
racism on the part of the person. It's not. It's that we live in America.
And
And in
some-
America, we have certain expectations of certain things. Just like the woman batting her eyelashes, we go, okay, well, that's acceptable because
and there's a certain.
it's the way it's always, Bruce
frame
Hornsby,
is-
that's just the way it is. So, and candidly, on one of my shocks on the committee was how my response to the numbers that I saw go up on the screen versus the response of other people in the room. And the general response to the people in the room were like, yeah, that's kind of what I figured.
Yeah,
But so, and so I said in the meeting, I said, when I'm looking right there, it says that a white woman gets a warning 40% of the time and a black woman gets a warning 29% of the time. That's a 13.
same infraction.
Well, we
Or
don't have it
similar.
by infraction,
Okay,
so we don't know.
So that's another
But
one of those.
but the only characterization you can take away from that is to say, if we say, okay, well then, does this race and gender commit more non-warning offenses? I think we can intuitively say, well, it's probably over the course of 40,000 tickets.
Right.
The law of large numbers says we're probably
Yeah, if
getting
you have
the same.
enough of a sample size.
Yeah, we're probably getting the same result. So there's a 13% difference. But so because I'm in customer service training, back through that, I went to real people.
Yeah.
And so don't flip on the outrage machine. Okay.
Don't flip on the
Yeah,
outrage
no,
machine.
because this is something we can lead on and we can improve.
Yes, and the discussion is the part.
Yeah. So, but if you look in terms of real numbers, in terms of the number of tickets that were given, it comes out to about, it's not exactly this number, but 365 black women got tickets that if you just accept that the numbers are perfect, which they're not perfect, but if you just said that's where we're starting, 365 black women, one woman a day, got a ticket that she might not have gotten if she was a different race.
Yeah.
Okay? Let's say a ticket's $100, okay? $36,500 coming out of a community or a certain group of citizens that might not have gone the other way. So just like we often try not to go on tangents and really get passionate about something,
It's
but
hard.
that $100 ticket becomes
Yes.
a failure to appear,
That's
which
exactly
becomes
right.
another warrant, which
That's
becomes
exactly
another
right.
problem, which becomes another problem.
Or you lose
So-
your auto
Right.
insurance, which makes you completely unable to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so if you look at it and you could say to yourself, well, yeah, but they got stopped because they did something wrong. Yes, absolutely. But if
But if you're going to be equitable,
if the goal of our community is equity, if it is, and we didn't answer that question yet, if it is, it's the goal of some of us.
I'm going to
equity
say
is
yes.
our goal. Yes,
For
I
us
think
here,
so too.
we're
Yes.
working towards
Yes.
that.
And I know that the goal of the sheriff is
Yes.
equity, which is where we're sitting and serving.
So you can't shy down from that then, right?
So
Like
anyway,
that's-
I know I rather than go really passionately into this, but I will just say, I think that we have an opportunity to lead there, and I hope that we'll take it.
I for one feel very grateful to hear the way even the thought exercise of it, right? That
Yeah.
you have really not just looked at those and done what
Yeah.
we do so often.
Do we have
Yeah.
time
Just
for
to-
one quick thought? More
Yeah.
thought
No,
on
we
this?
don't. I'm
Let me
sorry.
just-
We
let
only
me-
have 2 minutes before she has to go downstairs.
Okay, but I have to say this out loud because it's important based on the numbers of what I just did. Hispanic women, it's way worse. It's like 25%
Yeah.
more likely to get a ticket.
really
And I wanted to
interesting.
say that because I just used the first, because that's where they come in the columns. I didn't want to sort of
Yeah.
erase that.
No, but just identifying, something that you all represented that's open, it's public record.
Yep.
So I do think there are some really, I think having that dialogue and the exercise of what to do with that
Yes.
is, I think it's something I'm glad we're launching out there. And I think it's, once again, I'm a masochistic optimist because even though I'm disappointed to hear that, I feel like having the information, having people discussing that as citizens with law enforcement, with some people who may be able to really break into what some of those other correlates are, gives us an opportunity.
Yep.
Yeah.
And, I think we're probably going to get better and better about getting good data, right? Because we do
Yes.
have better ways of accumulating it because we do have a more comprehensive system of reporting those things. So I would say looking forward to what comes next. You let me know. We're going
We
to.
will. Yeah, 'cause there's more. We have more meetings about it. So
Yeah.
we're in the middle of it, which is why I don't want to get a whole thing into it. And please don't flip on the outrage machine.
No,
We're
I-
going to make it better.
Yeah, no, I was going to say, you all know that we really want to make sure everything's open and available for conversation here.
And Orange County is better than most
Oh
other
my
places.
gosh,
yeah.
It's a function of America. It's not a function of Orange
and
County.
it's very much I think my thing about being in Orange County is that we're doing this.
Yeah.
Right, that we're having this conversation. There's a citizen who comes from like the kinds of backgrounds and informational places that sits there with how many other people sit there?
There's 7. Well, no, there's 9 on the committee.
9 who also come from their
Right.
background and all their perspectives. And so having that I feel very grateful for it.
Yeah.
I know I'm overusing that word, but it's just a really good description for what I feel gives us some hope for the future. And that's not just numbers on, numbers to look at. And I just,
I'm not going to talk anymore because I can feel it. I can feel it. You got to go.
I just want to say thank you so
Sure, my
much
pleasure.
for coming and for being a part of this conversation and for donating your time to this board
Yes.
feed. And we're just so grateful. Quick reminder to everybody, redistricting, the next meeting is going to be September 27th. Watch the last virtual office hour. Commissioner broke it down. And then we'll be welcoming Chris Castro, the Director of Sustainability for the City of Orlando, on October 7th. So thank you.
Yeah, we're so grateful. Thank you so much for being here.
Sure.
And we'll do we can do as things come up, something,
Sure.
because I do think it's important that we kind of hear from somebody's in the room, someone's at the table. So thank you for being here, and we'll be in touch.
Thank you.